Let me talk today about, is revising inertia the key to zigzag motion, and why, and what about anti-gravity? And let me just tell you something about myself. I'm a theoretical physicist interested in fast, if possible, superluminal space travel. I have studied theoretical physics to basically go to the stars. Most of my works available is through my ORCID account. And if you click on this ORCID account on the PDF, you will go then to my works that are published. I have some background also in Freudian type psychoanalysis. I myself had an analysis from 1977 on to 82, so it's quite a long time away, but I'm still very interested in the development of psychoanalysis. And I'm no experiencer, and I'm not an abductee, at least. I'm not aware that I ever saw a live UFO. Some of my unconventional papers, I'm now probably mostly into quantum mechanics, foundations of quantum mechanics, quantum logic, and that like quantum computation. But most of my more unconventional papers were around this topic of space-time and travel and so on and so forth. And one of the papers I co-authored with Anton Zeilinger, who just received the Nobel Prize in Physics, was measuring the dimension of space-time. And Anton Zeilinger said at some point that this was his weirdest paper. Then I also was interested in fractal space-time. I suggested that there's a dimensional reduction via dimensional shadowing. I don't want to go into the details here. I just want to tell you that that I was always interested in related subjects. I was also interested in zero-point fluctuations and the Casimir effect. I proposed at some point that there is that the mass will change if you put an electron between metal plates. The mass of the electron will change. Recently, I've published a paper on interdimensionality, and I also was interested in generalizing the special theory of relativity. I called that relativizing relativity. And I was also speculating on supercavitation in the quantum ether. And then finally, I would like to point out that I was also interested very early on in computer-generated universes, virtual physics kind of thing. So what would happen if we were living in a virtual environment generated by some kind of computation or simulation? And I believe that there is a caveat in place. The following speculations are based on or relative to the assumption of alien visits with spacecraft or craft in general. And we should always be aware of the Chinese teapot allegory by Bertrand Russell. Russell pointed out that nobody can prove that there is not between the Earth and Mars a China teapot revolving in an elliptical orbit, but nobody thinks this sufficiently likely to be taken into account in practice. That is, if we claim extraordinary things, we need to come forward with extraordinary strong corroborations. Otherwise, common folks would not believe such claims, and for a good reason. Furthermore, the burden of proof for exceptional claims falls on the person making that claim and not on the skeptics. I will talk about basically 4 issues. The first one is the explanation trap. The second one is the data volume trap. Third one is experience abduction issue, a tale of two worlds. And then I will talk about non-fraternization. The explanation trap. Here I mentioned just two persons, two philosophers of science who were very important in that matter. Kuhn believed that science goes through phases of normal and revolutionary science, with normal science being focused on solving puzzles using familiar methods and problems, and the revolutionary phase of science involving a revision of current beliefs and practices. On the other hand, Lakatos modified Kuhn's views by proposing that a research program rather than isolated theories should be the unit of appraisal. In his view, a program is progressive if the new theory resolves empirical anomalies, is independently testable, and expands the empirical realm. He emphasized the importance of logico-methodological terms and the existence of competing programs as paradigms, whereas Kuhn was more into sociological issues with regards to the flow of science. Now, let me zero in on what I would like to point out. First of all, we need to acknowledge that there is a temporal succession of research programs with no semantic convergence. Both Kuhn and Lakatos agreed, I believe, that for prolonged periods there exist beliefs, hardcore assumptions, and practices that constitute the dominant scientific program. Any such dominant scientific program consists of core semantical concepts which translate into theoretical syntactic formalizations. Eventually, this program will be overturned by another scientific program, and the semantic concepts of competing or successive scientific programs are unrelated, whereas their theoretical syntactic formalizations might in some approximations coincide. Therefore, effectively, we are dealing with a temporal succession of scientific research programs whose concepts are entirely distinct and inconsistent. No semantic convergence can be recognized. Maybe I should, at that point, should give an example. If you think about our concepts of gravity as time passed by, the first was this Ptolemaic concept of epicycles, which was purely geometric. Then came the Newtonian force concept, which was based on distance force. And later on, Einstein's general theory of relativity was again based on geometric concepts, but there was no convergence of concepts. Yeah, you could derive one from the other earlier from later ones in some approximations, but the concepts, the semantic convergence is not present. Individuals or groups pursuing a specific research program will not be able to understand or reconstruct phenomena and technology associated with a program more than one step ahead. This is my major suggestion. Yeah. So if you are living with some belief system or system of explanation, you will be able to possibly explain or come up with explanations from the forthcoming system of explanations, but not from the forthcoming of the forthcoming, yeah, or more than one concepts ahead research programs. Therefore, trying to understand advanced technology from a civilization with more than one scientific revolution ahead will likely fail. And as a corollary, one could state that consulting contemporary experts, such as theoretical physicists like myself, astronomers or rocket scientists on crashed alien craft, may even negatively affect one's understanding of a phenomenon due to bias and ego investment in their field of exercise. This can result in inappropriate and distractive thinking and a waste of opportunity costs. Let me just give you two examples. Those you may consider them fictional. First example, imagine asking a shaman, medicine man of Borneo to explain a World War II airplane flying over his head. Yeah, this is the first example. Second example, which also may be fictional, but may be true. Consider the USA after Project Sign and before Grudge and Blue Book in a recollection of Oliver Harry Turner's analysis of 1971. This was an analysis the Australian Turner gave, Australian physicist. And in this recollection, he reports a rather astounding US investment into anti-gravity research. I'm quoting Turner now. A more astounding decision on the part of the US government was to allocate considerable funds to investigate gravity and the means of controlling gravity, despite the fact that science had not attained a level of competence to deal with either gravity or anti-gravity problems, and the only theory that might be applicable was Einstein's unified field theory, which was still incomplete at the time of his death. The US chose to support 6 universities and government agencies in an all-out drive to conquer the problem. Turner then goes on, such an intense onslaught on the gravity enigma was entirely irrational from the standpoint of conventional science and can only be rationalized within the context of a firm belief that UFOs were real and that the intelligences behind them knew how to control gravity. The drive to harness this power before the USSR could do so would be a strong incentive for the US government to fully support an anti-gravity program. Yeah, so this was Turner's view. And then I might add some notes on anti-gravity. Anti-gravity might not deliver the sudden changes in direction reported in UFO sightings. Anti-gravity could counteract the pull towards the center of the Earth, allowing for hovering or slow cruising, but not sudden changes in direction. According to Newton's second law of motion, any propulsion, including anti-gravity, must obey the law stating that acceleration is proportional to the force applied and inversely proportional to mass. This means that sudden changes in motion would require either applying a large amount of whatever force or reducing the craft's mass in the desired direction. Of course, these statements are true relative to the validity of Newton's second law of motion, which needs not be universally valid. I therefore suggest examining the possibilities of changing inertia or mass rather than anti-gravity. The problem is that our present concept of inertia or mass is based on electroweak and strong field energy as the mass of the virtual cloud surrounding respective charges or by couplings to the Higgs field. How to modulate mass or inertia under such circumstances? I believe that field theory is not good enough for that. As I said, I did some calculations changing masses in between of electrons or leptons between metal plates, but I still think that's not good enough. We are still striving for unification regardless of what contemporary theoretical physicists might tell you. And in any case, the show goes on. Maybe somebody sometime will break their silence or come up with a good idea. Well, there is a resolution, an obvious resolution of the explanation trap. Follow Freud's advice in the top an analytical approach called evenly suspended attention. This approach involves observing the phenomenon with as few as possible projections of the mind. Compare also Jane's mind projection fallacy, and without preconceived ideas of bias or biases, and allowing the observer to settle in even without immediate explanations or category formations. So now let me come to some more, let's say, flamboyant issues. let me give you my wild speculation of what happened. So this is not true. This is just my story. The question behind this is, did the USA process alien artifacts in the same manner as Nazi technology? The USA attempted to process alien artifacts maybe similarly to Nazi and other earthbound, for instance, Soviet technology. In doing this, paperclip style was inapplicable because of alien non-fraternization. Nobody explained it to them like the former Nazi party member and SS Sturmbannführer von Braun did. Eisenhower's military-industrial complex handled most of these efforts, coordinated by what was then the Air Material Command at Wright-Patterson Field, Ohio, at various DOE, Department of Energy, DOD, Department of Defense or industry, like maybe Battelle or maybe Lockheed ratios. The military-industrial complex succeeded with some proximity technology that may have been on the verge of discovery in any case. The military-industrial complex failed with some more advanced technology, such as propulsion techniques, which was based on concepts 2 or more scientific revolutions ahead of contemporary Earth-limited resources. And it still does so until today. It still fails. Therefore, the USA might possess some craft, this is my pure speculation, but cannot mass produce them. Maybe the propulsion units of some crafts were salvaged to build an own type of craft around them. So let me then go on with another trap I find important, considering it's the data volume trap. I agree with the evaluation of the Condon report by the Technical Committee on Atmospheric Environment and the Technical Committee on Space and Atmospheric Physics of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Taking all evidence which has come to the subcommittee's attention into account, we find it difficult to ignore the small residue of well-documented but unexplainable cases which form the hardcore of the UFO controversy. In fact, the subcommittee finds that the opposite conclusion could have been drawn from its content, namely that a phenomenon with such a high ratio of unexplained cases, about 30% in the report, should arouse sufficient scientific curiosity to continue its study. The issue then, the committee goes on, seems to boil down to the question, are we justified to extrapolate from 0.99 to 1.0, implying that if 99% of all observations can be explained, the remaining 1% could also be explained, or do we face a severe problem of signal-to-noise ratio of the order of 1%, that is 0.01? And effectively, we are drowning in data if we assume 1% signal-to-noise ratio. And then my first question is, if we put all of these data with this high signal-to-noise ratio in a database, why do we need a database? We really need to single out core cases, very important ones, not big data, quality over quantity. But for maybe good reasons, those data are stowed away in carved out, unacknowledged special access programs. Monetizing data is bad scientific practice. Data need to be open access. So if somebody wants to sell their data, I would not consider that a very good scientific practice. We need open access. Databases very likely will be filled with a lot of very bad, prosaic, mundane sightings. If the signal-to-noise ratio actually is under 1%, will even AI be able to sort out the wheat from the chaff? I don't think so. Efforts drowning in data may very well be a good strategy for kicking the can down the road once more. The experiencer abduction issue is the next thing I want to discuss briefly. And I would call it a tale of two worlds. If you have an experience or have been abducted, there is no doubt about the existence of the phenomenon for you. But what about the other common folks? Many experiencers, those on the inside, don't understand that persons who have not shared similar experiences, those on the outside, are skeptical. And there are some similarities to Freud's own seduction hypothesis in the sexual realm. In 1896, Sigmund Freud presented his theory that acts of sexual abuse and violence on children caused adult mental illness, known as the seduction theory. In his article, he presented that idea in his in a lecture he gave in Vienna, and in his article, The Etiology of Hysteria. This was not very well received, as it implicated clients and members of the Viennese society, leading Freud to later reject that theory and blame patients for deceptive memories. In his controversial book, The Assault on Truth, Geoffrey Masson criticizes Freud for rejecting the theory and argues that it was due to pressure from colleagues and unconscious conflicts. The similarity with supposed alien abductions is that both raise the question of what occurred, whether abductees experienced them or had false memories or delusions. And also, if you take the experience of psychoanalysis, maybe hypnosis is not the proper method to cope with abduction cases, in the same way as Freud abandoned hypnosis in favor of free associations and other techniques. And let me just close with some thoughts on non-fraternization. What if the others don't want to communicate? Suppose there are alien visitations by others, even if some of us in power knew, they might not have these in the power to know of our own race, they might not have the autonomy to publicly acknowledge the existence of others. For others to pursue their goal, it might not be favorable to fraternize. Why should they? Their goals or motives might not align with our interests. There might be consequences for disclosure projects. Suppose the others had telepathic abilities, maybe they could be in our head or could steer us. You know, what kind of consequences would that result in if the others don't want us to disclose? Maybe our governments try to cope with them while pretending normalcy for the rest of us. These are, of course, very hypothetical, highly speculative and paranoid scenarios. But what if they were true? And let me end again with this caveat that all speculations made here were based on or relative to the assumptions of alien visits with spacecraft. Thank you very much for your attention.